share 3 training tips that can improve your running and your training fitness goals. So stick around and we'll jump right in. So number 1 is foot strike pattern. Right here we have a New Balance. This is an 880. It has a 10 millimeter heel drop. We have an S-Lab Ultra by Salomon, and this has an 8 millimeter heel drop. And then we have the Hoka Speed Goat. This is a 4 millimeter drop. And then finally we have the Ultra Rovera, which is a 0 drop shoe. So heel drop, if you've looked into it at all, basically by increasing the size of the heel, you're encouraging a heel first strike as opposed to a forefoot strike. So with the heel first strike, you're more likely to feel the stress of that impact in your knee, whereas in something like the 0 drop shoe or a minimalist shoe, you're more likely to feel the impact of every foot strike in the foot and in the ankle. Why does that matter? Well, if you look at your foot strike pattern, whichever running style you favor, you can use the other form of running to your benefit. So let me explain. Let's say yesterday you did X number of miles and that was your long run, whatever long is for you. And you're a heel striker. And so your knee and pretty much everything associated in that area is fairly tired and fatigued. But you don't want to take the day off. You want to still train, but maybe you need to have a bit of a recovery training session today. So now you can cut that distance in half. You can do maybe a short run today, and then do it in something that favors the other end of your foot. So a 0 drop, or even something like the Speed Goat, that's 4 millimeter drop. And so you're running at a slower pace, and now you're striking on your forefoot as opposed to heel striking like your previous day. And so by doing this, what I've realized is I can train more days in a week. I can keep my volume of training up, and I'm not sacrificing the recovery component and putting the body into these situations where it's not getting enough time to recover. So the way that I like to look at your foot strike pattern is it's like gears in a car or gears on a mountain bike. You have low gears for climbing, and you have high gears for descending, and then you have your mid-range gears for everything on level terrain. And so you can utilize your running shoes in the same fashion. If you're going to be doing something that requires a bit of uphill work, if you're not somebody who typically does a lot of uphill running, the volume of running that you're going to do that day is probably going to be a fraction of what you can typically run if you're doing a run around a track or just a run around your neighborhood. And so if you're somebody who typically would heel strike, then maybe going into something that's a 0 drop shoe and running in the hills on a 0 drop shoe is going to be enough to create the stress that you need on your foot, ankle, those tendons and ligaments, and creating the right adaptation. And so you're getting the growth of that run after the training session without jeopardizing your progress so far and getting yourself into a situation where you're running into chronic fatigue because you're overtraining parts of your foot. So instead of looking at running through the lens of, oh, I ran yesterday, everything hurts, you can look at it a different way, whereas, hey, I ran yesterday and my heel and everything associated with my heel style of running is tired. And so today I'm gonna run using my forefoot and midfoot and train on that portion of my foot. And so you can train these different styles of running or changing up your foot strike pattern. That's gonna make a huge improvement on your training volume and your foot adaptations as you negotiate different types of terrain. Okay, tip number 2, training methodology, training intensity, and training volume. As you increase one, you need to decrease the other. This is going to be the most beneficial way for you to train for longevity in the weeks, months, and eventually years that you put into whatever your fitness or training goals may be. If you're training for a specific pace today, for example, intensity is your goal for that day. That means that your volume should actually come down. If you're increasing the volume or the volume is staying the same, but you're increasing your intensity, you're overloading your system, and it's going to be very difficult for you to continue to do that day after day without the proper recovery. What we found is if you split out your intensity and your volume, you're not experiencing the same brain fog as if you were doing both simultaneously. And so now those small sensory inputs that you're getting, maybe from that tweak of the ankle or that stiffness in the shoulder, you pick up on it. You detect it very early, and you're able to start making adjustments in the middle of your workout. And so now something that would have maybe been overtrained, causing some significant fatigue, maybe even requiring you not to utilize that muscle group for a couple of days or a week or maybe even a couple of weeks. Now it's something you pick up on, you make that adjustment on the fly, and you're just left with a bit of soreness after the workout. It compounds just like interest, and that much more capable of recovering from it the next day and continuing on with your training cycle. And so that gets to having a certain piece of gear on hand. I recommend everybody should have some sort of weight vest. It doesn't really matter what brand you're using, but it needs to be an adjustable weight vest. So empty, this thing weighs 2 pounds, and fully loaded it weighs 44 pounds. I'm currently wearing it at 22 pounds. And so what I'll do is 3 to 4 days a week, I incorporate wearing the vest into my workouts. So if I'm doing a pushing exercise or a pulling exercise, or some sort of exercise that's a chipper, right? I'm gonna do however many minutes, however many box step ups to a certain time, I'm gonna wear the vest. And so that way, as I strength train, as many times as I feel is appropriate week to week, I'm not overloading my system by loading up the bar real heavy and trying to do whatever that weight is over and over. That's putting me too close into a heavy load. That's putting me too close up against the risk of injury. And so I want to de-risk every training session as much as I can, but still creating enough stimulus to get the adaptation out of it so I can continue to move toward, the fitness goals that I have. So that's a great thing that you can incorporate. So I recommend having a vest and splitting out your intensity and your volume. Finally, tip number 3, sports nutrition, specifically liquid and solid calories. Now there's pre-workouts and there's post-workouts, but I'm here to talk to you about what to drink during your workout. Maybe even what to eat during your workout, depending on the length of your training session. So for anything that is 90 minutes or less, so an hour and a half, I'm gonna be sticking with purely a liquid calorie. There's a handful of different products in the market. I'm not sponsored by anybody, and I'm not gonna endorse any specific product, but this product that I'm using here, it's just simply carbohydrates, sodium blend. And so it's got 80 calories per scoop with 350 milligrams of sodium and 20 grams of carbohydrates. And then I pair this with an electrolyte supplement in the summertime. This is an extra 500 milligrams of sodium, and I will apply 1 scoop of the electrolyte and then 2 scoops of the sodium carbohydrate blend into my Camelback. I'm gonna go out for a training session that is more than 90 minutes. I put that into 70 ounces of water, and then that's something that I will sip on every 5 to 7 minutes. So that way I'm taking in calories, I'm taking in fuel as I'm burning fuel off. And so there's this exchange that's happening. Now, you're never gonna not go in the hole when you're running endurance races, or when you're doing long distance efforts, multi-day hiking, multi-day hunting, mountain biking, whatever it is that's got you out adventuring, or even just in your own gym and you're training, couple hour block of training that day, you're never going to prevent yourself from going in the hole on calories. You're going to go through a calorie deficit. You will experience the bonk. You're going to feel that sensation of hitting the wall. All that putting some fuel in your system is going to do is going to help manage that sensation. It won't be as intense. It won't be as abrupt. You'll feel it slowly coming on. It starts signaling you that you're experiencing a bit of a crash. And so at that point, you can adjust your intensity. So whatever work intensity you're operating at, you may have to dial that down a bit, begin taking in some calories, refuel, restore some of those energies, and then you can return to that previous intensity. Now, if you hold that intensity and you're not paying attention to the small signs, then you will bonk. You will experience that crash. And so it's important to start with a liquid calorie very early into your training session. The more that you can do at the beginning of your training session, the greater benefit it's going to have in the later portions of your training session. Now, solid calories, I'm talking about things in the form of those Clif blocks or energy chews, or even just normal food, peanut butter and jelly sandwich, whatever it is. I'm usually not looking at taking in solid foods like that unless I'm going to go over 90 minutes, over the 2-hour mark. That's when the solid foods become more of a factor. But the downside of solid foods is when you're working at a high intensity, your digestive system begins to slow down, and so it becomes more difficult to process solid food. So I prefer to use a liquid calorie very early on into a heavy or hard training session and stick to that and just continue to apply it little by little. And so I don't hit the bonk, so I don't hit the wall, I don't end up with a big crash, but I'm also not getting that sick to my stomach feeling because I have a full stomach from solid food. So these are the 3 tips that you can apply right now to improve your running and your fitness goals.